Welcome, everyone, to Day 5 of the 2023 Grad Futures Forum, the Professional Development Conference for Graduate Students hosted by the Graduate School at Princeton University. My name is Eva Kubu, and I'm the Associate Dean for Professional Development and Director of Grad Futures. We're delighted you could join us for this fourth year of this annual conference designed to support graduate student futures at Princeton and beyond. Since the launch of Grad Futures in fall of 2019, the Graduate School has continued to expand its commitment to professional development. Grad Futures now serves as Princeton's hub for empowering graduate student futures through a broad spectrum of skills training, mentorship, bespoke experiential opportunities, and experiential exploration. We created this annual conference for both purposes to advance our own graduate students' professional development and to serve greater graduate communities beyond Princeton. Each year, registrations continue to pour in across the country and from around the globe. It's a testament to the imperative of preparing today's graduate students with the skills they will need as emerging scholars, researchers, entrepreneurs, and leaders. It's my pleasure to introduce Jean Tom, who is the Executive Director of Development Engineering, Chemistry, Process Development at Bristol Myers Squibb, where she leads a group of chemical engineers focused on the development of chemical processes to synthesize small molecule drug candidates for new therapeutics. Her team generates process knowledge through lab experimentation, modeling, data visualization, and scale-up activities to enable technology and process transfer to manufacturing. Prior to joining BMS in 2006, Jean spent 19 years at Merck Research Laboratories. During that time, she held positions overseeing process development, pilot plant operations, and technology transfer, while contributing to new approaches to talent outreach, engagement, and development. She's passionate about leadership development, and she's going to be teaching a course at another institution on leadership development, technical leadership in particular. She has more than 14 years of experience in pharmaceutical products from Merck and BMS, and bringing those products to market. We're delighted that Jean will be with us. She is an alumna of the Chemical and Biological Engineering Department. Please join me in welcoming Jean Tom.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Eva, for that introduction. I'm delighted to be here to share some things that I've learned over the career as a chemical engineer. I want to talk a little bit about how I navigated my journey to thinking about technical leadership. In particular, talk about three areas which I think are foundational to developing one's leadership skill: the self-awareness, awareness of other, and then the relationship management. So just a little bit about me. So my story starts with my parents who immigrated from Hong Kong to the U.S. So I'm a first-generation American. My siblings and I was the first in our family to go to college. So I did my at MIT, and then as Eva mentioned, as a PhD alumni from Princeton. Spent my career working in research and development on pharmaceutical company compounds at Merck and then at BMS. Things I learned in school that I use all the time has to do with the technical topics, the engineering mindset, the system approach to problem solving, organic chemistry, because that's how we make these molecules, and then the chemical engineering unit operation is how we scale up and be able to manufacture these. But I think that I've learned in school that I use probably even more is thinking about how to use communication style and what it means to engage with, manage, and lead people. And so since this is about graduate students and thinking about what you do after, why did I go to graduate school? I actually had been working at Merck, and I was 3 years into my industrial career before I went back to graduate school. And I was really very excited about the work I was doing. It was fun, challenging, and exciting. But I was also surrounded by a lot of colleagues who had PhDs, and I really felt that getting a PhD would enhance my research skills and ability to solve new problems, enable me to contribute further to my the work that I was doing and be more impactful. So my experience at Princeton was very much focused on my thesis research. It gave me challenges thinking about the experimental and computational techniques, technology, analytical techniques, scientific communication in terms of publishing and giving conference presentation, and doing that in-depth problem solving that you do as part of a PhD thesis. I was very fortunate. I had an outstanding thesis advisor and mentor, Paul DiBenedetti, who heads up the research activity here at Princeton. I didn't explore much beyond doing academic research. I was really excited to get, try and get my PhD and get back to work quickly. So the downside was I didn't explore, but the upside was I did finish relatively quickly at Princeton. So what do I do at work? So I have done a lot of technical things. The general areas process development of these small molecule drug candidates, and that involves laboratory development. It involves pilot plant execution, where we're scaling up the processes, transferring that technology to manufacturing. There's a large project management component, and I've been involved with bringing in new capital, equipment, and technology to our pilot facilities. I've also had roles that are more operational in terms of thinking about leading a cross-functional team, managing a pilot plant facility, managing the group of engineers, developing safety programs. And all of these activities require you to work with a lot of different people, and it requires you to figure out how do you collaborate best to get to the goal of what you're trying to do. And that sort of led me to be more involved with aspects that really relate more to people and culture within the organization in terms of leadership development, mentorship, recruiting, and outreach, and trying to drive this inclusive and innovative culture. So what I've learned that is a common paradigm when you're in a very technically focused organization is that we hire people to do the science. And we look for technical excellence in terms of, okay, where did they go to graduate school? What have they accomplished? How many papers have they published? And then where they're at your organization, what have they contributed technically to their projects? And so when someone does really well there, we say, oh, that's great. Let's move them into a management and leadership position. But the thing is that, people who've been doing the technical, doing the science, they've been studying that for a decade. Think of the time you spent as an undergraduate, as a PhD in your initial part of your career, and they do that well, and then suddenly we expect them to go into this new role to drive the science and expect them to be experts. Because driving the science is not necessarily about doing the science anymore. It's about building effective teams, developing people, motivating, inspiring others, removing the barriers. And so this is probably not the best way to develop your leaders. And so what I've been a proponent of is really thinking about leadership preparation before they get to that stage. And leadership preparation is about understanding communication style, the emotional intelligence of working with people, providing guidance, thinking about how different people lead and working with that, thinking strategically, decision making. And having a strong self-awareness of where are your strengths and where are your weaknesses, and how do you leverage that. And so these are a lot of topics. So I think in this talk, I'm only going to manage to get through probably the first four in terms of understanding communication style, the emotional intelligence, providing guidance, and thinking about effective leadership style. So these are the four topics, and I would argue that building upon this knowledge allows you to build that self-awareness in terms of your communication, your interactions, and motivation, and then having that awareness of the people that you're working with, and then figuring out how you build those relationships to be more effective. So how does one go about learning about what is their style? How do they communicate? How do they interact? And there's many tools that are available, and this is just a list of them. And they're usually based on an assessment where you answer a series of questions. And they range from where, there's a very detailed one, such as the Hogan assessment, and Myers Squibb is well known. But what I am a really big proponent of is something called the DISC assessment. And what that allows you to do is sort of increase that self-knowledge to understand how you respond to conflict, what motivates you, and what causes you stress, and how do you solve problems. And so I'm just going to share.
Different, but they are predictably different. Do you believe that people are different? How many of you guys believe that people are different? Yes, of course, people are all different. How many of you believe that we can predict how someone will act or react in a given environment? Let me show you how we do that. In the general population, there are 4 types of people, and we call them dominant, or the D style, influencing, or the I style, stable, or steady, which is the S style, and then the C style is the compliant style. And those are the people that make up our world. And you see those people all the time. You see those people all the time. If you've ever walked up to an elevator and saw the guy that presses the button and then steps back and looks at the button again, and then he presses it, and then he taps it or holds it, because he thinks that as he presses that, the elevator must surely arrive faster, that is the D personality style. Dominant, direct, they're drivers. They want to control their environment. They want to do something to make something happen in their world. And so they will keep their thumb on that button until the elevator comes. Now, once the doors open and everyone walks in and they close, the one guy that turns around and starts talking to people, the guy that's smiling because once the doors close, he knows he has a captive audience, that is the I personality style. They're the influencers. They're the ones when the door opens, he goes, boom, 3rd floor, lingerie, enjoy your day. Those are the I's. Now the S personality style, they're stable, steady. They're very relational. They are people. Now they're the people that if the door's starting to close, but there's somebody that may or may not be wanting to get on the elevator, they'll stick their hand out. There's plenty of room. Come on in. Come on in. Now the D is back there going, oh, come on, man. I gotta go. Like, why are you waiting? The S is holding the door open. And if there's too many people, they'll say, you know what? I'll just take the stairs. Let somebody else go. You go on. It's okay. That's that S personality style. Very stable, steady. Now, the C's. The C personality style is the guy that's very quiet, off to the side, and he's standing there looking at the plaque that says maximum weight, 3,700 pounds. And he's calculating body weight. He's going, if one person gets on, I'm off. Like that's the guy. He's the guy that notices when the inspection date is due on the elevator. So those are the 4 personality styles. Now,
So that's a really great video just to introduce the DISC, the 4 styles. And what they're saying is that people are different, but they're predictably different. And this is an assessment that was developed by William Marston in 1928, who's an American psychologist. And just as a recap, there's this 4 style. 1, the dominant, direct, decisive, doer, influential, very interactive, very interesting, steady, supportive, stable, sincere, and then conscientious, very careful, cautious, compliant. I myself am somewhere between a D and a C, so I'm known as a DC style. So what this model is really looking at 2 axes. On the y-axis, contrasting someone who's very assertive and bold with someone, and then on the x-axis, on the left, where you're more logic-focused, questioning, challenging, and then on the right-hand side, you're more people-focused, accepting, receptive. And I've come up with some, I think, people that I think fit into extreme examples of each of these quadrants. So I think Elon Musk is someone that I would think is a high D type personality. Oprah Winfrey, I think, is someone who's probably a I. Mr. Spock, who's not a real person, but he's probably a classic high C person. And then Mr. Roger is, I think, a really good example of someone who's a high S. So you know who these people are, of the differences of these people. And the motivation for each of these people are different. Someone in the high D really places emphasis on accomplishing results, the bottom line, and projects a lot of confidence. The high I person places a lot of emphasis on influencing and persuading others, being very open. The high C person places a lot of emphasis on quality, accuracy, expertise, and competency. And then the high S person places a lot of emphasis on cooperation, sincerity, dependability. And you can think of it as the person in the high D is always thinking of what, and the person in the high I is who, and conscientious, the high C is why, and then the setting is how are we going to do this? And it also then gives you a sense of the behavior for the person in the high D, they sort of see the big picture. They can be very blunt, accepts the challenge, they get straight to the point. The high I person shows a lot of enthusiasm, is always very optimistic. They like to collaborate. They dislike being ignored. The high C, is very objective reasoning. They want detail. They don't want to be wrong. They want to be fairly accurate. And then the high S, they don't like to be rushed. They're very calm. And they really are thinking about what supportive action can I do. And so how can something like the DISC model help you communicate? Well, it turns out we all have a natural inherent style. That is some mix of the four quadrant. Everyone has some of each of those four quadrants. The examples I give, they just have a much stronger one in that one quadrant. And you can learn to recognize your audience when you're communicating. And you find that it's really easy to communicate with people with the same style, right? Because you're approaching things very similarly. And what you want to do as you work with a lot of different people is learn to adapt and flex your communication with those that have a different style, because those don't see the way communicate the same way that you want to communicate. And so one way to think about it is, with someone who's more of a D, they're going to ask a lot of what questions. They're going to talk more than listen. They're going to go right to the issue. So when you're talking to someone with that style, you want to be brief, to the point, stick to the topic, and be very clear about the rules and expectation. The highest person is going to ask a lot of how questions. They're going to ask versus tell. They're going to listen more than talk. They have a more slower and steady delivery. And so when you're talking to someone that is more of an S, you want to be more logical and systematic, be really sincere and appreciate what they're providing. You want to give them advance notice of any changes, because they don't respond very quickly to, you need to make a decision right now, which is something, someone at high D is very comfortable doing. And very similarly, you could look at high I, they're going to ask a lot of questions. They like to use a lot of stories. They like to go off on tangents. And so you want to approach these folks probably more informally, keep the conversation light, be relaxed and more sociable. Someone in a high C, they're going to ask a lot of why questions. They're going to listen more and talk. Maybe you might not get a lot of reaction. They want that precise detail information. And so you want to give, again, clear expectation deadline. Be very tactful and reserved, and be precise and focused. So navigating this difference is really important when you're thinking about team dynamics. And I show here, each of the culture of each of these parts of a DISC model, what they reward and what they are criticizing. And so what you find is, the directness of a high D can be viewed as pushiness by a high S. The passion that someone with a high I conveys can be viewed as, just over excitement. The thoughtfulness that someone in a high S can be viewed as really caution by someone high I. And then, being very complete and having that large attention to detail of a high C can be viewed as, oh, man, that's over-analysis from a high I. So being able to navigate these differences in style in a team setting is really important if you recognize it and see how people are interacting, and that allows you to help the team stay on what they're trying to work on. So working with people, when you learn more about this, you can start to recognize, does this person respond more as a D, I, with an S or S, or a mixture of them? And then you should think about how should I interact so that my points are best understood and accepted by that particular person with that style. And I'm not going to go through the details of this. You can see that the high D is going to be task focused. You can see certain behavior and what their approach might be. A high I, you're going to see that they're much more people focused and thinking about how it's going to impact people. This high C sort of thinking about the data and how that analysis is going, and the S person is how are we going to do it, creating the structure. So this has been a really useful tool as I learned about it in terms of really providing the right message to different people if I want to make sure my point is understood and what I'm trying to achieve. So I So that's the introduction primer to this. There's just a lot of literature out there that you can look up. There's other types of personality community assessment. I just might say a few things about the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator, or MBTI. So that's a more complicated one. There are a lot of people who've done this as well. This looked at the 4 different indicators, the preference of your general attitude, whether you're extroverted or introverted, your preference of perception, sensing or intuition, process of judging. Do you think through, or do you just sort of feel it, and how you implement the information? And what you end up is, a lot of combination. You think of these 4 parts, and it then gives you some insight in how these people would process information, how you relate to people, how you sort of structure your relationship, and how you want to make decisions. So I'm a fan of this because I think it's a simpler view of trying to understand the different styles. Okay, so I provided this primer on the disc, a way to understand how different people are motivated, how they communicate, and how you might want to think about adjusting your style to be more effective in your interaction. So complementing these skills is what's known as emotional intelligence. And this is work done many years ago by Daniel Goleman, who's a professor of sociology and also writes a lot. Emotional intelligence is the ability to perceive, use, understand, and manage and handle emotion. And then manage of the emotions of people around you. So if you think of the emotion, knowing your own emotions and how to respond is that self-awareness. And then how do you manage that is the self-management of yourself, of your emotion. And then if you look at the other people around you, recognizing, understanding other people's emotions, that social awareness, and then manage that and what you are seeing, how people are responding or how their emotions. That's sort of the basis of relationship management. So this is a framework in which you're thinking about yourself and the social environment that you're around, and then recognizing your emotion, other people's emotion, and then being able to regulate yourself and how to manage your interactions so that you're recognizing what the emotions are. So I think this is a complementary set of tools to think about as you're learning about the DISC profile or other style profiles that's out there. And so how do you use something like emotional intelligence? It's about your self-awareness of your own emotional state and recognizing your behavior might impact others, and then paying attention to how others can influence your emotional state. What is it that triggers what other people are saying and what their response, and really being able to recognize that. And then the regulation, keeping any disruptive emotions, you always need to respond that way. So if you recognize that, you can keep that in check. And that allows you to handle change more flexibly, and perhaps pursue your goals and opportunities despite having obstacles or setbacks. And then from the social aspect, you walk into a room, you want to be able to pick up the mood in the room. Is everyone very serious, and so that may be appropriate to just throw in a joke or something. And you want to care about what other people are going through, and really hearing what other people are saying. And then the relationship management, I think, is sort of the culmination of recognizing yourself, that what's happening around you in terms of emotion, and then being able to regulate it. So that plays into, how to get along well with others, how do you handle conflicts effectively, how do you clearly express your ideas and information. So it really ties together, I think, having tools like the DISC in this framework. So how do you practice your communication using these tools? So I would encourage you to learn about it and perhaps share and discuss these concepts within your teams and groups. I know a number of professors that actually have their graduates come in and do a DISC problem. So he understands, how they best receive information and how to communicate. And this is the things that you can practice these tools when you're trying to provide feedback, trying to resolve a conflict, when you're negotiating, when you're trying to put alignment on a project direction or a path forward, trying to solve a problem with a lot of people. And so one thing to think about recognize is that your scope of interaction, when you're in graduate school, you're part of an academic lab group. Everything is sort of within that ecosystem, and maybe you have some interactions with other academic labs or other research centers. But when you go on to whatever you do after graduate school, this is probably more of the industrial case, is that you're going to be part of some function. You're going to have colleagues, managers, and project leaders. That is your ecosystem, but you're going to have to interact with folks that are in different functions that sort of upstream or downstream, and maybe there's other internal functions like R&D, your manufacturing, or your environmental health and safety. Maybe you're working with external partners, vendors, academia, other companies, or government agency. I work in the pharmaceutical industry, so the regulatory is really a big component in terms of how we think about the work that we're doing. So that's something to think about, is having those tools of interactions is really important, because you're going to be exposed to a much wider environment than, you're in one lab right now. And, these are the set people that you're going to interact with. And so the next topic I want to talk about is just briefly about managers and leaders. And people think these are the same thing, but they're actually not the same thing. Because I think being a manager doesn't necessarily mean you're a leader, and you can be a leader without being a manager. So the sort of basic definition is the manager is responsible for planning and organization and decision making. And someone who's a leader is really someone who's providing that vision, that inspiration, that guidance. And so in some cases, they can be the same, but in most cases, they're not necessarily the same. And there is some overlap. So if you think of a manager and leader, the planning and work, managing people is sort of the manager's role in providing vision and developing strategy. Sort of leader, there's still the aspect of relationship management and providing guidance and motivating people that I think is common to whether your role is as a manager or as a leader. And I've talked about the relationship management part, so I thought I would provide some thoughts about providing guidance. And so when you focus on guidance, I think in any role you have, you always want to be thinking, how can you give, receive, or encourage guidance? And guidance is really essentially praise and criticism. It's essentially feedback, but sometimes feedback has that negative connotation, like I'm giving you feedback now. But if you give people guidance, it's much more positive. And a framework to think about this, which I really am a fan of, is thinking about it in, so I'm an engineer, so you see all these X, Y plots. So on the Y-axis is how much you care, and on the X-axis is how are you going to challenge directly. And the quadrant you want to be in is in the upper right, and that's called Radical Candor by Kim Scott, and she has a really good book about it. And what it is, radical candor is, giving guidance that's humble, that's helpful, immediate, in person, and doesn't personalize. So it's saying something like, you sounded stupid giving that talk when you say versus you're stupid, right? So that's sort of the difference. You focus on the behavior, not the personality or the individual, and you provide specific example, whether it's praise or criticism or, how they can do things better. The other aspect, if you're not challenging directly and you're just sort of hinting at something, it's what Kim Scott calls it the ruinous empathy. And that's probably the most common mistake, is you're trying to be nice. You're not being very direct. And so what you do is you fail to help people correct their mistakes when you give that kind of guidance. And maybe that doesn't lead to so nice outcomes. And, down the line, they say, well, why didn't you tell me that? And what really epitomizes something like this is this tweet by Adam Grant. Adam Grant is at Wharton School of Business. He has a great set of podcasts and books. He says, politeness is not the same as kindness. Being polite is saying what makes people feel good today, but being kind is doing what helps people get better tomorrow. And so in polite cultures, people are going to withhold their disagreement and criticism, but in kind cultures, people speak their mind respectfully. And I'm just going to emphasize respectfully. That's really important, because if you just sort of speak your mind not respectfully, you end up in the lower right-hand corner, which is sort of the obnoxious aggression. so that's really just sort of being a jerk. And, if you're working with people that have S or C type personality, that is just not going to be effective at all. And then the final one, if people want to know what's in the lower left-hand corner, is called manipulative insincerity, and sort of that's the passive aggressiveness, and it's sort of like, that's sort of middle school behavior. So that's, something quick in thinking about providing guidance is, you should always find opportunities for this impromptu feedback. The day-to-day guidance sort of leads you to this radical candor, and being able to use the DISC styles to make is such that it can make this guidance more effective. And then just some points that, if you do this, that sort of makes backstabbing impossible, because you don't want to use the manager as the go-between for the guidance. And the employees are making a good faith effort to work out disagreement. And then if you have an impasse, have the employee and the colleague work together, work out what is the fairest, fastest resolution to avoid having dispute lingers. Okay. So the third part of what I was going to talk about is connecting DISC to the leadership style. And so wherever you are on this DISC, that is sort of associated with a type of leadership style. And there's more details about, what are the aspects associated with that. There's a great book by Sugarman, Schooler, and Willem about the 8 dimensions of leadership. So I'm a sort of a DC, so I'm a resolute leader. So it says, I tend to be a good problem solver. I sort of try to push my way through obstacles. I want to hold people accountable. And I often identify potential weakness in plans. So, when I think about it, it seems pretty reasonable. And so these are the other, there's like 8 of them, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but the high D, and so this is my Elon Musk example, and you can see, that probably is a good descriptor of what I've at least read about him. The energizing is the high I. They tend to rally people around goals. They look at the bright side. They're very comfortable being in the spotlight, and they're really accepting of other people's ideas. The inclusive, this is the Mr. Rogers. They're very people-oriented. They're creating this warm and safe environment, and they're going to overlook some people's flaw, but they'll deliver reliable results. And then the high C, this is my Mr. Spock leader. They're going to always maintain their composure, even in stress. They're really trying to figure out how to head off these problems with very careful planning. So what was really insightful was thinking about these type of leadership style and how it can be interpreted. So for myself, at best, people will view me as questioning, independent. I'm not afraid to challenge the status quo to get better result. But at worst, some people might view that, I'm pretty cynical and incentive, and maybe I'm just always just putting this negative spin on everything. And so you can see at best and worst, you can have very different interpretation, and being aware of that when you're working with a large group of people and recognizing, because that person has a very different leadership style, are you looking at them in the worst light versus at the best light? So I found this to be, a very insightful thing to think about working with a lot of different leaders. And you will encounter leaders and managers with very different styles, and each style has its strengths and its weaknesses, and you want to adjust your perception to assume really good intentions versus, the worst. And what having knowledge of these styles will help you is perhaps recognize how you might be perceived, and understand what the expectations are. And so you could learn to adjust and communicate more effectively with them. And that allows you to create more effective relationship and be more effective in your role and assignment. So I think I've covered, these 4 topics that I want to introduce you to, the communication style, emotional intelligence, providing guidance, and understanding leadership style. And hopefully you've seen what that leads to is being self-aware in your communication, interactions, understanding the motivation, having that awareness of others, and working on relationship management. And one final topic I want to just cover quickly is, if you think of yourself, you have a lot of goals and you want to have success and you want to have maximum satisfaction in what you do. And then if you're in an organization, that organization has its set of goals and they want the maximum contribution from the people that work with them. And it turns out that, this intersects when you're, and it's really, what you're going to do. That's the intersection, right? You want to maximize your satisfaction for yourself, but also maximize your contribution for the organization that you're in. And so hopefully you're somewhere here where what you're doing gives you maximum satisfaction, but you're also really able to contribute to the organization goals. And sometimes it's here, and that's okay. This is sort of when you just start with a company or your first year of graduate school. You're really excited. You're getting some satisfaction, but maybe you're not having that much results towards the stuff that's going on in the lab. This is not a good area to be in, right? This is where you really are able to contribute, but you're not really satisfied. So that's sort of, where the burnout is. And then, if you're here, that's probably not good for either the company or yourself, and you should probably think about doing something else. So that's a framework to think about, what, as an individual, to assess your goals and satisfaction, and then being able to communicate your aspiration in whatever organization you're in. Okay, so just to summarize, thinking about developing your skills to be a technical leader, the topics I covered today is just a start of developing a set of skills to be effective in driving the science. The skill set to be a technical leader can be achieved by anyone. This is not based on any natural charisma someone has. These are all learned skills. And when you go out into the workplace, you end up learning it by experience, and it takes a long time. When you're in graduate school, you could get a leg up and start thinking about these. And so you have some of these concepts and thought and practice ahead of that. And then also you want to maximize your satisfaction and contribution. And some of the difference between that may be the interactions and the communication and team dynamics of what you're working on. So if you can address that, that hopefully can help maximize that. And just utilize the resource available to learn this topic. Princeton University is a great resource, the Graduate School, the Keller Center, and I just want to mention the 3 books that I've mentioned today. So with that, that concludes what I wanted to present to people.
All right, I'm going to run around with the mic if anyone has questions in the room, and also get some questions on Zoom while we're waiting. All right, there's lots of questions. Always fun. Shannon, go first, and then if you can pass it around to him behind you.
Hi, great talk. So you talk a bit about the different personality styles and ways that you can tailor your communication based on the style of the person you're talking to. How do you handle that in group settings where you're trying to simultaneously communicate to probably a broad range of personalities?
I think you want to be conscious of everyone in the room, right? So you want to be able to, and having all these personality style is great because the diversity allows you to develop solutions that are better solutions. So you never want to be in a situation where everyone is of the same type of personality. So I think you want to be conscious. You have someone who's a high S or a high C. You want to make sure that you're being clear about how this process is going to work. And you're going to have the high Ds that really, how are we going to get to the solution? But I think you want to be able to accommodate everyone there. And what's really effective in my organization is we have everyone who go through the DISC. So they know what their profile is. And everyone has agreed to share it. And so they can see what everyone else is. So there's a recognition. And so you have a common language to say, hey, you're doing this, and that's, I know you want to do this, but we need to do this.
One question is, you mentioned that it's important for people to be trained to be leaders within science. Do you have some kind of system or program at BMS?
Well, this is some of it, is having people to do the DISC profile, and we have people. We talk about this. We have people in our group meetings talk about the D, the I, the S over time. And we have sort of management development course that we try to put people in where they talk about, how do you influence people when you don't really have direct authority? Yeah, so there's training courses, but we do a lot in-house.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a follow-up because I had a very similar question. Like in science, as scientists, we are always kind of socialized into asking questions, being critical, being skeptical? And you brought this up at some point. How much of it is innate versus some of your DISC profile is also based on your learning environment and your experiences and might change over time?
Well, I don't know the numbers, but I think scientists represent a large number of the high C and high S. So not surprisingly, that's what gravitated us towards this area was, we're always asking question of why. And so there is that correlation.
You talked a little bit about company culture, and I think that is such a key piece of choosing a place to work. Can you expand on the culture and how it impacts your leadership and management style and why it's an important consideration when you're looking for work?
Yeah. And so there's many aspects of culture when you're looking for work. I think you want to, you certainly want to ask people, how do they view the culture? Are people comfortable in, saying in giving guidance, are what kind of leaders, how would you describe your leader? Are they approachable? Right. So I think that is a big component. And as you know, there's probably multiple aspects of thinking about the company culture. What is that work environment like? What is the lab feel like? Are people sharing their knowledge, or is this a place where people are just sort of, this is my work and, I'm not going to help you with other work. So those are aspects in thinking about scientific culture there. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your talk. I really learned a lot. You mentioned mentorship earlier, and I was curious to learn more about the role that mentorship has played in the way that you've clarified or developed your own leadership style.
Yeah. So I've been really fortunate to have a number of mentors, starting with my thesis advisor, that some of my mentors, I've brought some of these ideas, like, can we do this? And they've been really supportive of, oh, that seems like a good idea. Go and try it. And that has allowed me the freedom to sort of explore these ideas and help permeate that within the organization that I'm in. So that's how I think the role of people who I view as mentor have enabled me to do that. Not that they're teaching me this, but allow me to explore this area.
I feel like I saw a few more hands up. Did anyone else have a question?
Is there anything on the Zoom from the folks online?
Not last I checked, but I'm going to run right up if no one else. No?
No.
Okay. All right. Oh, Eva, do you have a question?
I'm a huge fan of radical candor.
Okay, good.
Absolutely. And I think I really loved your point about sort of feedback being a gift, and the way it's presented is really so it's not critical. It doesn't seem as though it's sort of demoralizing. Can you maybe share an example of a time when you had to share a bit of feedback and sort of how you did use that radical candor equation? Just thinking of maybe one specific example.
I had someone who had worked for me, and we're doing a sort of evaluation of people in the organization, and I think one of my managers said, "Oh, she's really a sweet girl," and at the end of the meeting, I just pulled the person aside and said, the way when you say that, this sort of demeans, how we view that person. And the person got it right away. I think the other aspect of the DISC thing in terms of when I first did it, I didn't realize how direct I was with people, particularly with folks who are high S and high C. And I realized, oh, maybe that's why I don't really get a response. And so that sort of allowed me to evolve in terms of thinking about, recognizing people's style and, being, I'm not just pop in the office and ask the question I want, right? Because that doesn't really as effective as, I'm going to sort of engage them as on other topics and learn about them and then, say, here's the information I'm looking for. So in doing the DISC, there was some radical candor that I received and learned about myself.
And this is National Women's Month, and we had Reshma Sojwani as one of our keynote speakers earlier this week. She spoke of, a number of things: being brave, not perfect. She challenged us to really look, for ways that we could address sort of systemic inequities. As a woman in STEM who is a leader. Could you speak to sort of what would be your advice to other women in STEM and those aspiring leaders and those who are already leaders?
So there's a whole bunch of other stuff when you go into that topic, right? It's sort of the imposter phenomenon that I think is where I'd like to talk to women in STEM, because I think we all have that. And there's a lot of things to think about is that, a way to perceive, you don't know any less than anyone else in the room, but you just know this part and other people know other parts. And so that's a way, that would be one advice I would give to people who feel like, oh, do I really belong here? Yes, you absolutely do. You have this knowledge, but this other person has a different set of knowledge. And so you don't necessarily need to have the same knowledge to say that you're in that room. Does that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually wanted to ask a follow-up on that. That's my specialty. I can build on questions. Oh, we do. Oh, so sorry. I'll just go back to mine later.
You also had a question, yes?
Yeah, that's okay. I'll come up to
I just
mine.
have wait. My question is, it takes time to assess the personalities. So until you hire people, and of course if you are direct hire, yes, you talk to people. It's usually half an hour, 30 minutes or 1 hour. So how you really assess those personalities? Because it takes time to assess them and then know how to treat them, and then how all this to be really, because some personalities, they like direct approach. Some personalities, as you said, they need their special approach. So you have like some team building events, or you are using like lunches, or more how you really learn those personalities, because it takes time to work, to understand personalities of people.
Okay. Yeah. Great question. So we don't do this assessment when we're interviewing people, right? We don't think there's a right personality, right? We were interviewing people on the basis of, their technical competence and how well they're communicating. And so it's not until we hire them, they start, that we ask them to do the DISC profile. And then we start this discussion about, okay, here's what that means, and then work with the people to develop that, skill and awareness. Although sometimes, as you can see, I just put a picture of Elon Musk, and you can sort of see he's a high D. So sometimes you could see someone who's a very high I, or someone who's, maybe likely to be C or S, right? So you get an inkling, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't play in our decision in the hiring process.
So our last questions from anonymous attendee on Zoom. Thank you for the great presentation. What is your advice for a new manager that comes across a lot of challenges? Is it better to improve your current style or shift your style?
Well, right. So I think as a new manager, you want to have some basis to understand, how is your style and what are the other styles? And right, I think it's as a manager, I think you have the responsibility to do some of the shifting first, as opposed to expecting the people who are going to shift to your style. That's a better culture.
I think those were most of the questions in the room and on Zoom.
Well, thank you so much, Jean. That was an incredible presentation and so rich. I can't believe you covered all of those topics, quite honestly. And I know this is just the beginning. We're hoping we can continue to work with Jean and bring out some more of this programming into Grad Futures. We are so grateful to you, and we are especially grateful for our Princeton alums that are coming back to Grad Futures to present. So we wanted to present
Well, thank you.
a small gift.
Okay, well, thank you.
The new Princeton Companion.
Oh, great.
The new edited or the new written edition by former Vice President and Secretary of the University, Bob Durkee.
Okay, all right, well,
Lots
thank you
of
very much.
history about the graduate school in there. Please join us as well, everyone, at noon. We have a keynote talk by Ruha Benjamin, who will be in conversation with Rodney Priestley about her new book, Viral Justice, topics around inclusion, diversity, equity, and innovation. There will be lunch, and also immediately followed by that, we will have our internship and fellowship fair in the Frick atrium. So we look forward to seeing everyone over at the Frick building at noon. And thank you again. Big round of applause for Jean.
Thank you.